This week, we have the special opportunity of interviewing Jerrad Lopes, the founder of Dad Tired Ministries. Nathan especially has enjoyed listening to his podcast over the past couple of years, and we are so honored that he's joining us today to share some wisdom on keeping the end goal in mind, all while trying our best to stumble towards Jesus. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome to the Olive Shoots Family Podcast, where we talk about family and parenting, homesteading, and the things God is leading us towards. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Brittany. We've been married for 3 years, have one little boy, and just got our first piece of land where we plan to build and start our homestead. We are passionate about the family unit and getting back to the basics of the way God created us to live. We have big dreams and are learning what it looks like to pursue those dreams while first trusting God's leading.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. Hey, so we just wanted to welcome Jerrad with the Dad Tired Ministry, and we just wanted to thank you for coming on and joining us on our podcast this week. So if you could just take a second and just talk about your ministry, talk about your family, your kids, and just who you are.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate you guys having me on today. So I'm been married 13 years to my bride, Layla, married way up. Still don't know why she married me or picked me, but probably because I harassed her enough to say yes. Trying my best to follow Jesus, so consider myself, the deepest part of my identity is a son of God. And so I'm trying to figure out what that means daily. And I'm learning that the more I rest into that identity, the better husband I am and better man I am, better dad I am. I've got 4 kids from ages 12 all the way down to 2, and we live in South Carolina.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know that was kind of a recent change for you and just that story, and I definitely want to kind of get into that a little bit later. But one of the first things I wanted to ask you is just if you go on to the Dad Tired website and just kind of read through what you're all about and what you're doing, and even listening to the podcast, one of the things that you say a lot is stumbling towards Jesus, and just that idea of stumbling towards what God is leading you in. How did that phrase start in Dad Tired, and just what is it meant in the ministry?
Yeah, I went through a really rough season in my own marriage and life, and I would remember looking for resources for men and just trying to figure out my own stuff. And when I was looking, a lot of the men's ministry I found back then was like, man up, step up, get yourself together, like figure stuff out. And at that point in my life, I was in a really, really dark spot. And so I was like, it just wasn't helpful language, because I was like, if I could figure this stuff out on my own, or like step up or man up or pull myself up by my bootstraps, dude, I would have done it. Like there's nothing I want more, but I'm just in a really dark place. And so I kind of felt like there was it felt 2 ends of the spectrum. Either one, you're crushing it as a man, as a Christian man and spiritual leader, or you're just like, you're not even trying, because you're kind of buried in guilt and shame that you're not doing a very good job. And so for me, even just as a personal mantra, I was just like, dude, stumble your way forward. Just like, it's going to be messy. You're going to have your own sin and failures and shortcomings or whatever, but you can't give up. Like, for the sake of your family and for the sake of your marriage, you just can't give up. And so even if you're barely making it forward, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, like whatever, just keep stumbling forward, do whatever you got to do. And that seemed to resonate with guys, because guys were like, that's what I feel like I'm doing. I don't have this stuff figured out, but I want to stumble my way forward. And so we just kind of unintentionally made that a tagline, or something I say a lot.
Yeah. Have there been moments like in your family, or just that you've witnessed in ministry, where a guy, whether you or your family or another guy, has just latched onto that, and it's been able to be something where they've been able to go back to, and just in those dark moments, just like you were talking about, in those really difficult moments, that it's just been something they've repeated and have come back to you and said, hey man, thank you for just leading me to this phrase, or thank you for leading me to this thing that I could go back to when I just don't have it together, when I don't have it. And has there been a moment where you've witnessed that in ministry in someone else?
Yeah, man. I think what's super cool about Dad Tired is, we do resources like podcasts and conferences, and I know you've been part of that for a long time. But I think even bigger part of that, of the Dad Tired ministry, is really the community of like-minded guys. And so it really feels like, you can listen to a podcast and that's great, but it's even cooler to meet somebody who's like-minded. I always say that it's easier to find somebody as a man to watch a game with you, or go do something, go shoot guns with your, fish with you, do whatever, but it's hard to find a guy who's like, man, I'm committed to stumbling my way forward toward Jesus with you. I'm committed to helping you be the man that God's called you to be. That's really hard to find. And so over the years, I think it's just been really cool to see, to answer your question, to see a bunch of guys, thousands of guys who are saying that to each other. Like, hey man, I know you don't have it figured out and I don't have it figured out, but let's keep stumbling forward together because the prize is worth it. At the end of the road, at the end of our lives, when we're laying there on our deathbed, by God's grace, we want to be able to know that we ran the race well. And even if we were dragged across the finish line, at least we're trying to make it, And so, yeah, I think there's been, dozens and dozens, if not hundreds and thousands of stories of guys who have said, my marriage, I probably would have given up on my marriage because I felt overwhelmed by guilt and shame. But because I'm part of a community of guys who can stumble together with me, my marriage is still here and I'm still engaged with my family, which is just that kind of stuff. Hearing that kind of stuff is what makes me keep wanting to do this, because it's eternal stuff. It's the stuff that we're working on as husbands, fathers, and disciples. It's the kind of stuff that will have impact 1 trillion years from now. And how many things do we do right now that you can say that? Hardly anything that we do right now in our lives can have that. But if you're focused on your marriage, your family, and yourself as a disciple, that's going to have an impact for trillions of years, which is insane.
Have you noticed, just in talking about just stumbling over things of men and fathers, almost getting caught up in the wrong things and think, I think of a newborn dad who's just fumbling over just becoming a dad, of just the practical things of, how do I hold my newborn? How do I get up in the middle of the night and feed and help my wife and those type of things? And I think there's some stumbling in that aspect of just figuring out the practical, but I don't think that that's necessarily what you're getting at with stumbling through. So, just when you say that what we're doing as husbands and fathers and disciples is lasting and it's eternal, what kind of encouragement would you have for the dad who is just thinks he's stumbling, but maybe that's just stumbling through the things that every dad goes through and learning how the practical things, but really the goal isn't to learn how to be the best dad who can do all the things well, but it's learning how to be the best follower of Jesus. And what kind of encouragement would you have for that dad stepping into, and bringing home a newborn and just feeling all the waves of emotions and things and newness of it, but bringing them back to what are we actually seeking after? Yeah.
Well, I think what you're describing is kind of the difference between being a good dad and being a spiritual leader. And we have our culture is actually pretty full of a lot of good dads. If you go to the park right now today, you'll see a lot of dads engaged with their kids, which is pretty rare. My dad's generation, my dad wasn't around growing up, so I didn't go to the park with my dad. But I think when I was young, I didn't see a lot of dads at parks. I saw a lot of moms at parks, and especially for our grandparents. My grandpa takes pride that he never changed a diaper, as he raised kids. That was I'm I don't think that that's something you should brag about, but that was I just provided. I worked hard and I provided and put money in the account, so, and food on the table and a roof over your head, and I did a good job as a man. And then I think a lot of us realized, like, well, we needed more than that as kids when we were kids. Like I needed more from a dad than to just provide, throw some money at the situation or put a roof over our head. Like I needed a dad to be there emotionally and physically present and spiritually available, like all those things. And so now we have a large group of dads who are like, okay, I want to be more engaged. I don't just want to throw money at my family. I want to be engaged as a dad. And so you have dads who are changing diapers and going down slides and being engaged with their family, which is amazing. But I think it goes to your question, like, is that enough? And it's a huge step forward for sure. But I think if we see ourselves as disciples of Jesus, then the ultimate thing that we can give our kids is not just money or a roof over their head or food or even to be emotionally present. All of those things are amazing. But the greatest thing I can give my kids is to know and love Jesus. Again, that's the thing that will last for eternity. My kids might be physically safe. They might even be emotionally stable and far from God. And I don't want that because I know emotionally stable kids still might go out into the world and try to find their identity in their work and what they can accomplish and maybe in sinful things. And so what I need them to do, what I so long for my kids to do, is to find their identity in Jesus. And so that's, as a dad, as a disciple of Jesus myself, that's the greatest thing that I want to impart to my kids, is that their identity is in Christ alone. And if they do that, then I feel like I'm at least taking some massive steps forward toward my goal as a father. But I think that's getting to the what you're talking about, like the difference between spiritual leader and just being a good dad.
Do you ever have trouble turning your mind off when your head hits the pillow or getting a good restful night's sleep? We've struggled with that often lately. Between dreaming up new ventures, the long to-do list, and just winding down from the day, it can be difficult to get the much-needed sleep. We've started using Earthly Wellness Goodnight Lotion, and it has made a huge difference. It has helped us to fall asleep faster and to feel more rested when we wake up in the morning. It is rich in magnesium, which has loads of health benefits and helps promote restful sleep and normal sleep cycles. You just apply a small amount, 10 to 15 minutes before you go to bed. And pregnant or nursing mamas, it's healthy and safe for you too. It also helps relieve those leg and muscle cramps that seem to happen in the middle of the night. We can't recommend it enough. If you are interested, click the link in our show notes and check out all the other amazing Earthly products while you're at it. We have grown to love this company because they carry natural, organic, made in the USA products that actually work and are safe for our little babies and kiddos as well. Yes, the link does help support our family. Earthly is generous enough to give a small percentage back to me if you use my link. So thank you so much in advance for your support. And we hope you like the Goodnight Lotion as much as we do.
Yeah, definitely. You also mentioned just kind of community and just the community of Dad Tired and those like-minded men who are in it together. You've been in men's ministry, of Dad's ministry for a while. Just how do you encourage genuine community among men? Because I think, so many times it's just so difficult to break those walls down among men. And we even said it at the annual retreat last year of just, coming in, we all have those barriers, and to break those down in a weekend is really, really hard to do. And I think Chris did a really good job of encouraging us to do that. But you've been in this world and this ministry for a long time. So just how would you encourage men to seek after and foster genuine community with other men?
Yeah, I would say one of the first things is you probably already have one or maybe two guys in your life who want that same thing, and you guys just don't know how to bring it up together and like get to that level of friendship. Most Christian guys, I would say, have a friend in their life who would want that. That doesn't mean that you guys have that, but you might have another guy in your life who would want that with you, have that same desire with you. And so it's going to just be the first one to be vulnerable and say it out loud. Hey man, I know, we like to hang out or do whatever, but I really see you as a friend, in my life that can help me become the man who Jesus wants me to be. And so I don't know what that looks like. You probably don't know what that looks like, but can we try to figure that out together? Like that would be huge. And that would take most guys who desire that to have that kind of friendship with somebody in their life that's already there. And then the other thing is just when you're there with these other guys, if you don't have that, we're trying to create resources on Dad Tired where you can find other guys like that, like local guys. There's probably a Dad Tired guy near you, like wherever you're listening to this right now, there's probably a Dad Tired guy near you. And so there are like-minded men out there. And then it's just going to be the first one to be vulnerable. Like I was talking about earlier, like the first one to say, dude, I actually am really struggling. One of my good buddies just texted me yesterday. He's like, hey man, how's it going? And I could have just said, it's going good, bro. How are you? And I wanted to text that, but I thought I need to continue to be vulnerable. So I told him, I was like, hey, Layla and I had a rough week 2 weeks ago. We had like a big fight. It was really rough. And he's like, oh dude, what happened? And we were able to talk about it, and process and point each other back to Jesus. But most dudes don't do that. Because we want to feel competent, like we don't know how to really talk about our emotions, But the first guy that's willing to do that, I promise you it'll be reciprocated. And then the next time that my buddy has a problem in his marriage, he's going to text me and be like, hey man, we just got into it too. But it's impossible to have these deep kind of friendships without vulnerability. Somebody's got to take the first step to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
One question I had was, how has your wife Layla been like? How has she helped encourage you in seeking that community with other guys? Because I know it's it's a lot of what you do all the time. So I'm sure it takes up a lot of time. And so how does she help encourage that, knowing it's good for you and it's good for y'all's marriage also?
Yeah, I think the big thing I've noticed with myself and with my friends is like really differentiating for my wife, the difference between just hanging out with buddies and these are guys who are with me that I'm trying to really grow close to so we can point each other towards Jesus. When you have 4 kids or any amount of kids and you're working, you got jobs and bills and life, like to just say, hey, I'm going to go hang out with the buddies. I don't know a lot of wives who are like, oh, sweet, go do that every week, multiple times a week. Like that's, none of us want that. But if I say, hey, I know this is going to take a night out of the week for us, but I'm committed to these guys that we're going to raise our kids together and point each other towards Jesus, that she would say, okay, that makes sense. And I want you to be around guys like that. And Layla knows, like we went through a really rough patch. I'm actually deeply introverted and I like alone time. And my tank can drain real quickly. So I'm like doing stuff and doing all work and ministry stuff. And then by the end of the day, I'm like, I just want to crash or veg out or whatever. But that will lead to isolation. And Layla knows, like, she's seen me when I've been isolated in deep isolation, and it's not good. So she actually will encourage me, like, you need to go be around good, godly men, for your own sake, not to be like podcaster Jerrad or author Jerrad, but just Jerrad, where other guys can just know you and you can confess into each other and encourage each other. Because she knows that without that, I'm just prone to all the lies of the enemy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good. That's really helpful. And I think even as husbands and dads of just naming that, being able to say, like, this is not just a buddy-buddy friendship, but this is, we're seeking after Jesus, and genuinely framing it that way, I think it is just helpful in marriage communicating of what's going on. I think that's really helpful for a lot of parents and husbands.
Yeah. So another thing I would say on that is Layla and I always try to keep the end goal in mind. And the end goal for us, we talked about just literally a couple of days ago. We keep bringing it up. The end goal for us is that we would be really old and that we would really love each other and we'd really love Jesus. And we have kids by God's grace who love Jesus and love each other. So that's that's the finish line for us. And so then you think, well, how do you get there? Well, I need good, godly men around me who are going to hold me accountable and push me towards Jesus as often as possible. I can't be isolated. So then when I say, hey, on Thursdays, every Thursday night, can I go be with these guys? She can say yes, because she knows that it makes sense for the goal. If it didn't align with the goal, then she should probably say, no, I don't need you to go spend more money golfing. I don't golf, but whatever the thing is. But if it makes sense with the goal that we've talked about many, many times, then it's easier for her to say yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's huge. One of your episodes that has impacted us just tremendously was just an episode on family mission and just creating that and creating those goals. And that's something that we've pointed back to just a lot. And in the last 2 years for us, we've gone through quite a lot of changes in our family and moving across the state. And for us, that was a big deal. And I know there's moving across the country for you guys was probably big for y'all. But a 3-hour move for us was huge. And
yeah, totally.
And so just pointing back to that family mission helped kind of keep us grounded in what we were moving towards.
Yeah.
How important is that to have that goal in mind, whether it's a goal of 60, 70, 80 years down the road of this is what we want to look like. We want our kids to know Jesus. We want to be still in love with each other, sitting next to each other. And that's the goal in mind of just how important is that to help keep you grounded in the day-to-day decisions of following Jesus and loving your spouse and being a good ambassador and parent to your children. Can you just give encouragement to families of just how important are those values and that mission and those end goals?
I honestly don't know what could be more important because it shapes everything. I mean, Jesus was ridiculously goal-focused. He knew he came here to accomplish the will of the Father, and that would dictate how he spent his time, how he talked to his disciples, what he talked to them about, where he went, when he healed, when he didn't. Like it shaped everything because he knew that like the goal is the cross, the will of the Father, like all these things. And so for you, and I guess a good analogy could be if you're just driving down the highway. So just imagine you're taking a road trip with your family. For us, we have Disney World 4 hours away from us, and the kids are begging that I take them. I told them it's either that or college. Like that's how expensive it is. So, so we have 4 hours away. So imagine they wanted to get to Disney. That was the goal, right? We all wanted to get to Disney. Well, if I didn't have a goal in mind, I'm just like, well, let's just start driving toward maybe Florida, and we'll just see what's there. But we don't really know what we're doing. Well, then every time we see a billboard, we might be tempted to pull over or take an exit. It's like, hey, there's a museum here. It's like, okay, well, we don't really know where we're going or when we're supposed to be there or what we're going to do. So sure, let's just pull over and check out that museum. And oh, shoot, that museum was really lame and it cost us lots of money and time. Let's get back in the car and get back on the freeway. And oh, there's a cool restaurant. Let's take that one, right? And so you just keep pulling off because you don't really know where you're going. And you end up wasting a lot of time and a lot of money. The same is true for life. Like, well, just to stick on that analogy, if we knew we were going to Disney, the kids wouldn't even let me pull off, right? They'd be like, no, don't pull. Who cares about that museum? Who cares about that cool restaurant? We're trying to get to Disney. Keep going. Get there faster, right? Do whatever you can to do. Save the money because we got to use it in Disney. So I know this analogy is lame and will break down really easily, but the point being, if I know what my goal is in life, then when all the flashy billboards come, even though they're tempting, I won't pull off despite how tempting they are. And so to put that into like a real context, if I know the goal for my marriage is to, I want to be old and holding my wife's hand. I want my kids to love Jesus. Well, that's the goal. Well, so sometimes we might say, well, you should move away, or a boss will tell you, you should put in some extra time at work. Or I might think I'm going to spend a little bit more money on this. Or you might think I'm going to just dabble in this sinful thing for a little bit. All of those things are billboards trying to pull you off of the freeway towards your goal. And if you don't really know where you're going, other people will tell you, you should just pull off. This is really great. You should dabble in this sin. You should work a little more than you should. Who cares if you take time away from your family or from your kids? Like you'll just go wherever feels right at the time. And so, dude, it changes everything for a family that says, this is our mission, this is our goal, and this is why we tell our kids, like, we're not doing this because this is the mission of our family. We're not going to spend money on that. We're not going to spend time on that. It shapes everything. And obviously there's wiggle room in there, like we're flexible, and we'll go wherever the Spirit leads. But ultimately, that end goal changes the way you talk to people, the relationships you have, the way you spend your money, where you choose to live. It changes everything. Sorry for the long analogy, but hopefully that helps and is not distracting.
I work in construction, and it's pretty regular that I ache and hurt after a long day's work. But I also want a healthy and natural solution to my pain without the long-term side effects that come from over-the-counter pills. I've been turning to Earthly's Pain Potion for day-to-day relief. Its pain-relieving and anti-inflammatory herb combination have helped me to start my day after waking up sore and to rest after lifting heavy objects all day long. When I need extra or more targeted relief, I use Earthly's Pain Relief Rub with St. John's wort, yarrow, and full-spectrum CBD. Just rub a small amount of the cream on the painful areas for fast soothing and quick relief. The Pain Relief Rub is also safe for pregnant and breastfeeding mothers, as well as children ages 1 and up. I recommend both the Pain Potion and the Pain Relief Rub because they help me get back to my work when I need it most, but also because they are made by a family-owned, made in the USA, and organic company. If you are interested, click the link in the show notes and check out other Earthly Wellness products while you're there. Yes, the link does help support our family. Earthly is generous enough to give a small percentage back to us if you use our link. But I wouldn't be endorsing them if I didn't truly believe in their products.
How did y'all come up with your end goal together? Was that just something you agreed on easily, or is it something that maybe you tossed around other ideas and then landed on this? Or and I'll tag on to that. Were your kids a part of that, or did you just tell them about it after y'all came up with it, kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Layla and I have natural bents with the way that God's wired you guys. He's already wired you in personalities, and then he took your unique personalities and knit you together to be one. And so the two became one, which is just beautiful. And he did that on purpose, based on your personalities and all that he wants for his glory. It was intentional to bring you together as a couple, and even to give you the kids that you have. It's all he's sovereign over all of that stuff, I believe. And so, we just started to look at natural bending. Where do we naturally start to lean towards? So one of the things we said, for year one of marriage, before we even had kids, we said, we always want to be able to live on either 2 part-time jobs or 1 full-time job. And we said we would be willing to sacrifice whatever in order to make that happen. So if it meant we lived in an RV so that we could just work less and spend more time with each other and eventually with the kids that we would one day have, that was a huge priority for us. We didn't both want to work, and that's not a theological issue. I don't care what other families decide. That was just for us. We love spending time together, and we want to be the main influencers of our kids and have lots of time with them. And so we said, we'll either both work part-time or one of us will work full-time so that we can, just try to have as much somebody home with the kids and together as much as we can. And we did that for years. Layla worked part-time as a nurse, and I took a bunch of part-time work at pastoral jobs and odd jobs and all that stuff. But that was already our natural wiring. We weren't really Layla didn't have a huge desire to she's a super gifted nurse, but she didn't have a desire to climb the nurse medical ladder and have 30 years. So that shaped eventually that we would decide to homeschool our kids. But all of these things were kind of natural bents. We would naturally do these things. One of our mission statements is that we want our home to give people a glimpse of heaven when they come here. We want them to feel a sense of a deep peace, almost a supernatural peace. They just feel a deep sense of rest when they're in our home, whether that's for a dinner or they're staying with us as guests. And we just love to host. That was a natural bent for us. And so we decide all right, when somebody comes into our house, we want them closer to Jesus by the time they leave, whether they're an atheist or a longtime follower of Jesus. We want them just a little bit closer to Jesus than when they got here. And then that shapes how we live our life and how we plan our meals and our weeks and all that stuff. So I know I'm rambling a little bit, but those are all just natural bents and personalities. And then you just try to take what's already naturally, how you guys are naturally gifted and your natural bent towards things, and then you just add some intentionality towards them. And you write a statement based on it. If you love to do sports, Then you think, how do I use this for the glory of God? Like I want to coach my kids, or maybe our mission statement is we'll coach and we'll be a missionaries to sports teams or whatever, the T-ball team or whatever it is. And you put some intentionality towards something you're already going to be naturally bent toward.
Yeah. Yeah. And then how did you guys include your kids into that mission, and just, recognizing their gifts and then including that into, that natural bent towards the end goal?
A lot of that is still happening. I mean, that we're in the middle of shaping that. My oldest is 12, and he probably understands that the most because he's been alive the longest in our family. And he's getting to a spot where that, like, he really starts to understand that. My second to oldest is a 10-year-old, and she's starting to understand that. My 4-year-old and 2-year-old have no idea. They're just like, whatever mom and dad tell us to do. But what we've always said, we've actually lived in a lot of homes in their short life and in our marriage. Too many. I've actually felt convicted about just planting roots and staying in one spot. But we've always said wherever God sends us, we are sent as missionaries. And so even before we came into this house, we watched this house get built. We live in like a development with tract homes, so we were watching this house get built. And even when we were coming to over the weeks watching them build this, we would just come and we would pray, and we would tell our kids, like, God is sending us here. And we would pray for our neighbors, even the lots back when our neighborhood is actually fully developed now. But even when it was just dirt, we would say, man, God, would you bring us neighbors who you on purpose want us to be near to, and that we could be a blessing to. And my son knows that. Like whenever I coach a sports team, I always tell him, look for the kid who doesn't have a dad around, and let's figure out how we can be a blessing to that boy. And inevitably there's always a kid on the team or multiple kids who don't have dads around. And so I always will be super intentional. Yes, we're talking about soccer or basketball or whatever, but really I'm telling my son in between practices or whispering in his ear, like, think about that boy. How do we be a blessing to that boy? How can you befriend that boy and be a good influence on him? So just trying to help practice and implement. God's got a bigger picture for our family. It's not just our winning games and having fun and living in this house. Like we're sent ones as a whole family.
That's good.
Yeah. I think that's really powerful. I think that's really helpful for families, just of walking through of not just giving your, like you said, not just being a good dad and giving the skills to your children, but it's revealing what God is doing around them and cluing them into that eternal reality and that long-term, this is what we're here for. It's super important. Well, I know we're kind of running out of time, but I just wanted to give you just some time to talk about what you've got going on at Dad Tired coming up soon. And, I know you have several camps, retreats coming up and that sort of thing, but also just your new book. I just got a new copy of it. Haven't been able to read it yet because it just came in, but flipping through it and some of the questions in there would be so helpful to husbands and families. Even one that I specifically remember is like, how do we approach intimacy after having a kid, and just how practical that is, but also how often that's just a question that comes up in so many guys' lives. And so I think that just this book will be very helpful for husbands and fathers. But just wanted to give you some time to talk about those things coming up in Dad Tired.
Yeah. Well, you said all of them, man. I appreciate you just promoting. I don't need to add anything to that. I appreciate that. Part of that book that you're referring to, I just wanted to talk about questions that I know all of us guys are like thinking through, and I just don't know where people are talking about those kind of things. Like all my friends are talking about that after we have babies, and it's like, well, intimacy has seemed to gone down because my wife just had a baby, totally natural and normal. But like, how do you deal with that as a family and as a married couple and as a dude? And so I just try to ask and answer those questions in the most gospel-centered way that I could. That book just came out. That one's called the Dad Tired Mixtape. But we have a bunch of books. I try to write books for dads who I know are busy and for guys who aren't like normal. They're not reading 100 books a year. They might read like one book a year maybe. And so whenever I see an Amazon review from a wife that's like, I've never seen my husband finish a book or even read a book, and he finished this one, it's like the greatest compliment of all time, because I'm like, that's who I was writing to. So we have that in the podcast and events. Ultimately, there's like there's kind of 3 levels I would think of dad tired. One is if you just want to be completely anonymous and you're just like, I want to personally try to be a better dad, but nobody talk to me. I would say just read a book or listen to the podcast. Just like that's gonna be the greatest start. If you're like, I would like to meet some other like-minded dudes, but I don't want to like meet them in person, then we have a free online community, and you could still kind of be anonymous, but you get to start to meet other like-minded guys. And then if you're like, no, dude, I'm ready to I need good, solid men around me and get to know other dudes. Then we have like in-person stuff. You can find a local meetup near you, or come to one of our retreats or one-day conferences or something. But I know the stages of like guys wanting to engage, and there's really a way for guys to engage at all 3 of those levels.
Where can they go if they want to get involved and go to those things or get your books or do anything? Where can they go to find those?
Yeah, dadtired.com will have everything for you. But you can get a book wherever books are sold. You can listen to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And then if you want event or community info, you can go to dadtired.com and get that.
Yeah, we just thank you so much for joining us. We just really appreciate it, and just thankful for all that you do and all that you've done for us through Dad Tired, and have sparked many conversations that we've had, and how we perceive parenting, and just how we've stepped into it ourselves. So, yeah, we're very thankful for you.
Yeah, man, I'm super honored to play a small role in you guys' journey. Thanks for letting me be part of it.